Namaste and welcome back to Waking Up with Mindful Surrender Yoga. And we're going to try to answer another question from the chart. The big word there is try because I never know how these are going to turn out. And I just put it up as it is. So I'm going to reach down. I'm going to try to get to the bottom of this. There's a lot of big pages. I know I'm scooping around, but yeah, I guess this one was wanting to come out. I'm going to take a deep breath. And I'm going to set my timer. There. And I'm going to read the question. And what is it today? Oh. Not a biggie one at all. No, not at all. How do you heal from trauma? How do you heal from trauma? Wow. That's a big one. And of course, I have to reiterate here that I am not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I am not a therapist. Anybody experiencing the residual effects of trauma need to see somebody who specializes in that area. And even not all counselors specialize in trauma, so it's best to find someone who specializes in trauma. At the same time, I say that because I'm still connected and attached to the psychology that is very important to our sense of therapeutic healing in this world today. As I said before, I once intended to become a psychologist and took most of my psychology courses necessary in the undergrad, but was unable to finish. Not unable, I chose not to finish because I went on to become a nursing educator instead. But that being said, I do agree with psychology, and I do believe that it is important to access that field to some degree. It can be very, very helpful. It can take us to a certain point for sure. But then I always suggest going beyond that, like I have done in my own personal life, as I encourage other people to do, is go into yoga. Now, psychology is a humanities study, right? It's a human science study of the mind. And so is yoga. Raja Yoga was known as the science of the mind back in the day when Patanjali first developed his sutras or start reciting his sutras to students. And it is a science of the mind. It is a way of studying and understanding the human condition in the mind, right? So when we're talking about trauma, it's how the events in our life have affected our understanding of life through the perspective of the mind. Now, what mind are we using makes all of the difference in the world. And most of the time when we talk about trauma, we're talking about the field or understanding trauma through the veil of personal mind, of psyche, the sum of all our learned events, the conditioning that was mostly established by the time we were 7 years of age, right? 0 to 7 is our conditioning years. We're operating on a certain theta wave, brain wave, where we are absorbing information and really owning it and doing what we can to make sense of our environment and the people around us so that we can survive. So 0 to 7 is crucial time for conditioning, and is also a crucial time for trauma holding on to trauma. And so if anything has happened in those 0 to 7 years, we can have past trauma stored in our bodies, stored in our idea of who we are, stored in our psyches, and this personal version of mind. And that will be how we see the world for the rest of our lives. Every choice we make, every feeling we have, every decision, every word we speak, every role we take on will be a result of that trauma that we're holding on to. So it can have a very intense and negative impact on the remaining years of our life. Now, of course, trauma can occur any time in our life. It doesn't just have to be 0 to 7, but childhood trauma definitely has more of a stored sense to it. Like we tend to store it more because of our conditioning, because we store all our messaging from 0 to 7. We store all our things we've been taught from 0 to 7, all the lessons learned from 0 to 7, all the consequences and the results of those consequences from 0 to 7 inside our mind. But if trauma occurs and we get to a point where something happens in our life that the mind says, the conscious mind. Remember, there's 3 levels of mind. There's the conscious mind, our everyday functioning mind. And then below that, we have our subconscious mind, and that's where most of our conditioning from that 0 to 7 years is held and stored. And below that, we have the unconscious mind. We're very seldom aware of what's going on in our subconscious mind, and we're never aware of what's going on in our unconscious mind. But we are aware of what's going on in our conscious mind. So if conscious mind, we have this thing, life just unfolds in front of us with this very challenging event, a car accident, a loss of a loved one at an early age, unexpected abandonment, any of those things. Say at any time in our life, we can be 40 for goodness sakes and still experience trauma. But when the mind says, I can't handle that, and it stuffs, and because it is too painful, there's too much suffering, too much chaos, too much whatever that for the mind to handle or make sense of at that time, it will stuff it down into the subconscious mind through repression and suppression and a host of various other defense mechanisms, but suppression and repression are the ones we most tend to use in trauma. So we push it down below conscious awareness so the conscious mind doesn't have to deal with it on a day-to-day basis, so you can keep on going with its day-to-day functioning. But we'll have this stored stuff inside us, and that is trauma. All emotion, all experiences, all phenomena the 5 senses take in, all the mind interprets from the world around us is just meant to flow through us, right? So we're meant to see an event. Oh, there it is. I see that. I hear that. I feel that. I smell that. I taste that. The mind the body takes it in. The mind interprets it. This means that. This is good. This is bad, right or wrong, whatever it does. And then it's meant to, I feel that, have the felt experience of that. And then it's meant to flow through. But in trauma, we take it all in. Conscious mind doesn't want to deal with it, so it thinks it's pushing away, when really it's just pushing it down and it's stored inside. But it's creating energy that needs to come up and out of us. So it's rolling around inside of us, so it comes out in anxiety attacks and panic attacks, and you don't understand why I'm having a panic attack now. Why do I feel so anxious now? It comes out in our dreams, we may have night terrors, or it may come out in flashbacks. All of a sudden we're doing something and something very similar, or some sensory information we're picking up is very similar to the sensory information we picked up when we were having the trauma. It sends us back into the past, into that stored memory that we are actually clinging to by pushing it down when we're thinking we're pushing it away, but we're actually clinging to it and holding it in. So it can bring us back into flashbacks. We can have all types of things with trauma, right? And all it is the fact, if you look at the word trauma or what it means, is that we're storing and we're holding on to and we're clinging to things that we've experienced in life because we didn't know how to deal with them. We're holding on to the painful energy, the memory that's wrapped in painful energy, instead of just experiencing it. Oh gosh, that's what it feels like. That sucks. I don't want to experience that really bad. But until we do that, it's still going to be percolating inside us, just like a geyser ready to come out at any minute until we deal with it. So that's what trauma basically is. It's wounding, undealt with wounding, unhealed wounding that is getting more infected, that's percolating inside us, waiting to come out of us in one way or another. It's going to leak out somewhere until we deal with it. So trauma is undealt with pain, basically. And so, of course, what's the answer to dealing with undealt with pain? If it's causing all these issues in our lives. Because every decision we'll make when we have trauma, that's known as samskaras in yoga tradition. These things we stuff and store within us and hold on to. It's going to be like a habitual pattern. It's going to become an impression or an imprint inside our psyches. And it's going to influence the way we see the world. So if the psyche is just a veil over which we see the world, and we have all these samskaras in it, this trauma here, that trauma there, this person did this, a lack of trust there, painful wounding here, and we're seeing through that, we're going to make all the decisions for our future based on that. Well, what will stop me from hurting? Which one of those choices I have out there in real life will be the safest, that will do the least amount of triggering of this wounding I have inside me? What will make me feel better, knowing that I have all this junk inside me that I got to get around to feel better, right? So what will be the least pain-inducing experience out there related to what I have around me in the form of samskara, in this veil of psyche I developed to protect myself? So what do we do? So there's all kinds of things to do for trauma. Like I said, first of all, get help for trauma. Deal with it psychologically. How does it affect the psyche? You don't, deal with the pain. Be willing to face the pain, but have the guidance of a therapist or something to help you deal with the pain. And that's the psychology route or the psychiatry route of dealing with trauma. But you have to take it, I have learned through my own personal life that you have to take it a step further and go beyond the protection of the psyche. Go beyond how did my events affect my psyche? And what am I doing in my life now because of that pain, so that I can, get by safely and comfortably as much as possible? How have I limited my life because of this pain that I've stuffed and stored, this fear, this shame that all goes with the trauma? What have I done to limit my life so that I feel safe? And so, yes, that's one thing you need to explore on the psychological level. But we can take it further to say, well, who suffered the trauma? The more we fall back away from this idea that we're this little me, this little personality, this little mind, this little body that endured the trauma, we start seeing ourselves as the human, or that which is in the human, exploring humanity through this body and mind. We start to detach from the traumatic situations we have come through. Not dissociate, because there's a difference between dissociating. Is often a psychological term used to explain how people disconnect from their conscious mind or subconscious mind so they don't have to experience pain. But in this type of detachment, we're actually realizing, as we realize who we truly are, that we are not the trauma we experienced. We are not the being who experienced it. We are that which is witnessing and observing it. So there is a distancing that comes between what we experienced and who's experiencing. And that just creates such a great balancing out, and it allows the mind that's always saying, I can't handle this is the conscious mind, to realize it can handle it, because it's over there. That's not who I am. I'm here. A lot of times with trauma, we identify with the trauma. We become the trauma. We become the victim. We become the pain we experienced. We become what was done to us. And we cannot detach from it. We may dissociate. A great deal of time, dissociation is one of the common defense mechanisms used with severe trauma as well, especially in childhood. But we are not detaching from it. We are not distancing from it, as we would with yoga, as we would with understanding who we truly are and understanding what trauma really is. It was an event. Something happened in the world that the human mind, the conscious mind, determined was too hard for this human to deal with. So it stuffed and stored it, and it spent its rest of its life preventing it from getting triggered. And so once you realize that, then you can make the decision, do I want to continue to suffer in the way that I've suffered because not because of what happened to me. The suffering is not about what happened anymore. It's about the way I'm trying to hold on to myself, hold on to the suffering that's causing the suffering. I'm trying to hold on to the trauma, hold on to it. And so eventually you get to the point where you're willing to let it go. And really let it go means to give up all avoidance techniques, give up all suppression and repression, all this tendency to want to push it back down whenever it comes up. It's being willing to feel the pain and feel the experience of the original wounding and all the wounding that was done on top of it to cope with the trauma as we process through life. So it is a willingness to let go In order to let go, we must face and confront that which we're letting go of. As it comes up, and it will come up on its own, and it will. In yogic tradition, it's known that all samskaras will rise to the surface eventually, because Shakti's underneath them, the joy, bliss, it's all underneath trying to push it up, because that is who we are, and that's trying to come through. It's always trying to come through. So whatever's stuffed on top of it will eventually be lifted up and out if we don't keep doing this, pushing it back down. So a willingness to stop doing this, to allow the experience of the wounding to come up, to feel it once and for all, and to let it go. Not force it out, not pull it out, not demand it out, not shame ourselves for it being there, and fighting and struggling against it. It's just a willingness to allow it to come up, allow ourselves to experience it, and allow ourselves to let it go. So if that's where you're at, I strongly encourage psychological intervention to some extent, counselor, somebody, therapeutic person to be there for you and guide you through the process. But I also encourage the use of yoga, both the hatha component, which help move the energy, the pranayama component, which help prana to replace pain, and prana will help push it up, and a willingness to release the samskaras that are there. So purification in yoga is a big thing, and that's the release of these samskaras, these trauma wounds that we've stored inside us. So just having a willingness to let it come up, being willing to face the pain, because that which was stored in pain will come up in pain, and you have to be willing to do that. And then just allowing it to come up by staying as open as you can to the experience of life. And watching yourself, observing the mind, observing how the mind shuts down, observing how the mind pushes down when it starts to feel uncomfortable, when these things start to come up. Observing your tendencies, your habitual tendencies. Observing how these impressions are affecting your life and how they will continue to affect your life if you are not willing to allow them just to come up and out once and for all. So it's a cleansing process, and it's a willingness to be cleansed, and that will help you with your trauma. Yeah. So I'm not saying don't go get psychological intervention by any means. Get help for trauma on the psychological level, and just be willing to explore it on a deeper level if you want true lasting healing from trauma. Well, I said a lot, probably much more than I intended to say. Thank you so much for joining me. May you have an amazing day. Namaste.